Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. It's the 8th of October, 2025. And we have actually some really good news to kick off the broadcast with this morning. I'm so excited about this one, you guys, that I had to kind of make it like the banner headline today. Justin Pearson of the Memphis Three. You all will remember that when he and Justin Jones and Gloria Johnson were kicked out of the Tennessee legislature for standing up to the GOP and protesting the unwillingness to bring gun safety legislation to the floor after a school shooting there, where they were booted out of the House of Representatives and subsequently reelected. Justin Pearson of the Memphis Three announced this morning that he is going to primary Steve Cohen, who has been representing Memphis for like the better part of, I think, 30 years, and who is 78 years old and running for reelection. I am so excited about this one. I had the benefit of meeting Justin Pearson last year on a call for the Harris campaign for Democrats abroad. In addition to the fact that he's just a radically significant leader for this moment, he's also a really nice guy, just a really, really nice guy. And he's 30 years old. He has been a relentless advocate for the people that he represents in Memphis. He would be an extraordinary voice in the House of Representatives. So I'm really stoked about this. And I also have to say that this is one of those moments where we get to think about generational shifts, right? I've been talking a lot here on the broadcast about the significance of watching the Mamdani campaign, the Fatah campaign in Minneapolis, the other campaigns that have been run recently, like starting really with Malcolm Kenyatta's campaign for the U.S. Senate from Pennsylvania, which I was deeply involved with, as you all know. That this is a moment where there truly is an opportunity for young leaders to rise. And Justin Pearson is just one of my absolute all-time favorites in recent memory. I will also just say that at the time that they were booted out of the House in Tennessee, I said at that moment that it was at that point the most significant political event of 2024. Of course, that was before the election. And a lot of people kind of like poo-pooed me on that. But the thing about this was that it put the Justins and Gloria Johnson on a national stage. And it really gave Justin Pearson and Justin Johnson an opportunity to really show what zealous, responsible, progressive leadership could look like. And so I am just so excited about this run. And I also have to say that this is a warning bell for like the old guard of the Democratic Party that is refusing to let go of power. This is really a challenge to the old school Democratic leadership. And, you know, I've met Steve Cohen as well. There have been times where I've aligned with him and lots of other times where I haven't. But I do think it's a moment where these old white guys in the Democratic Party really fundamentally need to step aside and make some room for a great new generation of leaders that are coming up the pipeline. So I'm so excited about this one. I think you should all get behind this campaign. Please go donate if you can spare the money, because he's going to need it. But also, I will just say that he is widely loved in Memphis. And the other thing is that he's going to have all the moms working for Moms Demand in every town in Tennessee lined up right behind him. So it's going to be a really interesting, intersectional, youth-based campaign that also is going to pull in a lot of other demographics. So I'm so excited. I'm just so excited about this. He's just a great guy. All right. So that's the good news that we're kicking off with this morning. Now, unfortunately, I have to turn to some like not so great news concerning Trump's threat to arrest Pritzker and the mayor of Chicago this morning. So If you have been following what's been happening in Chicago and at the Broadview detention facility outside of Chicago recently, you know that there has been an enormous uptick in violence from ICE and CBP. Particularly, there is reporting now that, not reporting, but facts, that ICE shot a Latina protester 7 times after egging her on to challenge them in her car. And apparently what the footage shows, according to her lawyer, that CBP is claiming that she rammed her car into them. What the body cam footage shows, according to her attorney, is actually that a CBP cop got angry at her, threatened her, said, "Do something, bitch," to give a justification for opening fire on her, then rammed his car into hers and opened fire on her vehicle. She survived, thankfully. I mean, it's actually quite miraculous after being shot 7 times. She has now hired, of course, an attorney. There will be a lawsuit emerging out of this. ICE and CBP, or rather CBP, is refusing to release the body cam footage to the public, perhaps because they know how bad it is. But I have to point out to everyone that there's been a lot of like, we're going to have a Kent State before too long kind of situation. That's actually happening now. In addition to that, there's footage from yesterday of ICE at the Broadview detention facility shooting a priest in the head with a pepper ball. And those things can kill you. They are not bullets, but they come at you with a very significant force. There's video all over Blue Sky about this morning. He literally was just standing in front of the facility, looking up at ICE on the roof, and they shot him in the head. So there's a tremendous escalation happening right now in Chicago that we all need to be aware of. And that is not to minimize this threat that Trump is now making against the mayor of Chicago and against Governor Pritzker. Because as we all know, the arrest of Ross Baraka as the mayor of Newark was a test case. Yes, they dropped that prosecution, but they then arrested and prosecuted, and that prosecution is still ongoing. My rep, LaMonica McIver, who was there when Ross Baraka was arrested and was physically assaulted by ICE during that arrest. So we can't take lightly the threat to arrest the governor of Chicago and jail him, or the governor of Illinois and jail him, or for that matter, the mayor. This is something that is very, very serious, and it signals, Mariam Kaba was just talking about this on Blue Sky, it signals what is likely to be an additional escalation of violence against the people of Chicago. So it's very important right now that we are paying attention to this, calling it out, calling our representatives in Congress, just going to make this very clear, to ask what they intend to do to protect Illinois and Chicago and the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago. What do they intend to do to stop Trump from invading Chicago with the National Guard? We talked about that lawsuit yesterday. Very critical at this point to make your voices heard on this, because the violence is escalating. We're not in a good place. In addition to that, and for the person asking in the live chat, how can a governor be arrested? A governor, so this is what a lot of people don't recognize. ICE has, I don't want to call it like universal authority, but they can arrest anybody essentially for anything. If they claim that it is something that is interfering with law enforcement, they can arrest anyone. So I'm not going to say that it's going to withstand a probable cause hearing or an arraignment, more on arraignments in a minute. But it might. And, you know, the reality is that they arrested Ross Baraka to try to stop him from doing his duty of oversight here at a detention facility. What is happening in Chicago and Illinois is an attempt by a governor and a mayor to protect their people from ICE. So nobody should kind of be under the illusion that they're going to be stopped by some kind of protocol, or for that matter, the requirement of a warrant. Just this morning, by the way, a judge extended what already existed in Chicago, which was a restraining order prohibiting ICE from arresting anyone without a warrant. The court found that notwithstanding that order, ICE had actually arrested 22 people since the order in warrantless arrests. And that's like what we know about. All right. So I don't think anyone should be at this point thinking that, you know, if Trump gives an order to have the governor of Illinois arrested, that that's going to stop ICE from doing it. Okay. ICE and CBP, just so everybody understands, CBP is as violent, if not more violent, than ICE, right? They have been patrolling the southern border and literally shooting people who come over it for a very long time. Okay. ICE is, as we know, has an enormous new amount of funding thanks to the murder budget that was passed prior to the current government shutdown. And they have a huge infusion of cash right now, which they are using to recruit people without any training or any experience. So the other side of this is that ICE is now basically made up of vigilantes who want to take out violence against brown and black people and people who are standing up for them. This is a situation where ICE needs no excuses. This is the other thing that I just want to caution everybody about. I see a lot of people running around blue sky saying, like, don't give them any excuse to shoot you. You should go look at the video in Chicago of what happened at Broadview yesterday of a priest in a collar standing in front of a detention facility doing nothing, and they shot him in the head. They don't need any excuses to perpetrate violence. And frankly, I'm really tired of this thing of like, just stay peaceful, don't provoke them. They don't need to be provoked. They're a force of vigilantes violating the law routinely. They're shooting people. Like, everybody kind of needs to understand that this is where we are, all right? So don't blame the victims, in other words. And it's also really important, by the way, that notwithstanding that, we understand how weak they are. And what I mean by that is that Trump's approval polls are in the toilet. Something like 77% of the nation in the last poll I looked at is opposed to the way immigration is being handled right now. Food is rotting in fields in California and causing food shortages because four people have been detained and deported, and people are refusing to show up for work. This is not a situation in which ICE knows that they are like in the right? Or where they feel secure in their position. The reason why the violence and the threats are escalating is because the position they are in is so weak. And so it's incredibly critical right now that we stand up and protest, right? And huge shout out to everybody who's on the ground in Broadview. I am following the reporting out of there. By the way, if you guys want really good reporting on the ground in Chicago, Unraveled is an independent media source that they've actually been there on the ground at Broadview, like filming, documenting, interviewing people. They're incredibly good. Kelly Hayes, who many of you know, co-wrote Let This Radicalize You with Mariam Kaba, has been on the ground and has been physically attacked by ICE. It's really important to pay very close attention to what's happening there and to amplify all of it. Because frankly, like, everybody needs to see the footage of what they're doing, because it's horrifying and the footage makes a difference. Like, this is one reason why Pritzker is calling on people to videotape what's going on. Okay, so, again, not great news. All right. By the way, I did want to mention, not that this matters at all, and it shouldn't matter to anybody, but the woman who was shot by ICE 7 times is a U.S. citizen. So keep in mind that the violence of ICE and CBP is not just restrained to those who are here on some form of status, okay, or who are undocumented. It is extending now to everyone who they perceive to be a threat because they know how disfavored they are. All right. This morning, Jim Comey was arraigned in the Eastern District of Virginia, which, of course, if you've been here for a while, you know, is the first place that I ever practiced the law. My first oral argument in federal court was in that exact courthouse. So he pled not guilty, not surprisingly, but there was some very significant breaking news out of this arraignment. First of all, the U.S. government did not ask for him to be detained. So he's released now on his own recognizance until trial, which is scheduled for January 5th. However, his lawyer indicated that they are planning to file 2 sets of motions to dismiss in very short order. One of them will be for malicious prosecution. And, you know, honestly, the reporting on this so far, now this just ended like a matter of minutes ago before I came on the air, but the reporting on this is very significant. So there will be a motion for selective and vindictive prosecution, a motion challenging the legality of Laura Halligan, who, of course, was appointed by Trump for the sole purpose of indicting Jim Comey. And then also there will be a second batch of motions filed by Comey's attorney, who used to be a U.S. attorney himself, by the way, that will include a motion for abuse of the grand jury process and an outrageous government conduct motion. So things are going to get very heated very fast in the Jim Comey case. But in addition to that, there is some very interesting breaking news this morning on whether or not they're even going to be able to proceed with the case. So you will remember that one of the things that Jim Comey has been indicted for is allegedly instructing those who worked for him and with him to leak information to the press concerning like Trump and other things. Okay. Well, it turns out that one of the folks that they're claiming he instructed to leak confidential investigatory materials to the press is a law professor. And this law professor has given statements to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia that on two separate occasions, he asked Jim Comey, when Comey was the head of the FBI, is it okay to talk to the press about this? And Jim Comey said, no, do not talk to the press. And so the whole allegation that somehow Jim Comey was like leaking information through these subordinates to the press is actually completely shorn up as not true by the witnesses that the Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office under this Trump lackey is claiming is the basis for the prosecution. So we knew already that there were problems with the facts of this case, and we knew already that it was a vindictive prosecution. But when your own witnesses are saying, actually, he didn't instruct me to do the thing that you've indicted him for doing, and you're relying on me as the witness to say that he did, your case will not make it to a jury. So, one of the things that I just want people to be mindful of here is that the motions process that is currently being signaled by Comey's own attorney will likely result in the case being kicked out of court, one way or another. But in the event that it actually ends up in front of a jury, the U.S. attorney, this newly appointed person, who also is like only handled I don't think she's ever handled a prosecution in her life, actually. Maybe it's like 3. Are going to have a very hard time convincing a jury to convict. All right. So I am anxiously awaiting that one going up in flames. Just say that. It needs to go up in flames because fundamentally what they're doing is prosecuting Trump's political enemies for no reason other than that they're Trump's political enemies. And I don't think this one is going to last much longer. I would be very surprised to see us make it to the January 5th trial date, but we'll see. I'll also just mention, for those of you who are not aware of this, this is a very tight trial date, and it should come as no surprise. The Eastern District of Virginia is known as the rocket docket for a reason. What that means is that unlike most federal courts in the country, this district in particular has, thanks to their judicial culture, a habit of taking cases to trial as quickly as humanly possible. In most federal court prosecutions, you would be looking at like a minimum of a year for a trial date. Here, we're looking at 3 months. So this is a very tight schedule. And again, I just want to remind everybody, I don't think it's actually going to make it to trial. Okay. We had a question this morning on Stephen Miller, who was, of course, the topic of yesterday's broadcast because he is now appearing everywhere on mainstream media. This was also true last night. He did a whole bunch of interviews on he was on CNN. He seems to suddenly be appearing everywhere as a means of kind of normalizing the fact that he's actually the de facto president along with Russ Vought and Tom Homan. And the interviews that he's giving do belie that he's a complete madman. Yesterday, he also glitched out on a CNN interview when he started to say that the president had plenary power to do whatever he wanted. Now, that looked like a technical glitch, but the video itself is very noticeable because the word plenary comes out of his mouth and then the whole interview stops. I don't think it's because his brain glitched out. It does look like it was a technical matter, but nonetheless, he's got a theory of presidential power that has never lined up with the law in the United States. Like there's a reason why these protests are called no kings. Plenary authority would give Trump the power to be a king. So one of the questions that I was asked today was, how do we get rid of Stephen Miller in terms of his leadership of the government? And I have to make it really clear to everybody that because he is in a non-appointed, non-vetted position, okay, he is like the chief advisor for domestic policy or something like that to Donald Trump, he cannot be impeached per se. I guess somebody could try, but I don't think it would be terribly successful because he's not an appointee. All right. He's literally like serving at the discretion of the president. He also is someone who over the last 10 years has managed to evade the wrath of Trump that has gotten, as we all know, one after another, after another, after another. I mean, on and on and on. Hundreds of people who served in the first administration and even in this one removed for crossing Trump. Stephen Miller seems to have the staying power of a cockroach after a nuclear war. And so, people have asked me historically, like, what could we do to get under Stephen Miller's skin? Is there any way that we could motivate him to leave government? I have to tell you that Stephen Miller, if you go back and you watch the videos of him on the back of a school bus in high school, has been committed from a very young age to a truly sociopathic path to power. And I don't think he's going to give up the power that he has been given now for anything. So I actually think that from the standpoint of our best use of energy, right, we have to confront the threat that we're facing in the form of his fascistic, sociopathic decision-making and the power that he has over the decisions being made in this country. And the way that we combat that, frankly, is by organizing, by showing up for protests and rallies, by doing the work in our own local communities to protect the people that he's targeting. And, I will just say one other thing. Because of how he presents, I said this yesterday, because you can't watch that man without knowing that he's completely insane. The likelihood that if Trump resigns or is removed from office under the 25th Amendment, or something happens to him in terms of a health crisis, the likelihood that Stephen Miller would be able to hold this coalition together, would hold the base together, is like zero, because he's creepy, like really creepy. As I said yesterday, he doesn't have the charisma or the crowd power that Trump has somehow managed to have thanks to his reality television upbringing. So I don't want people who are focused right now on how to create change to actually be directing their energy toward, like, how do we bring down Stephen Miller? I am much more interested in directing people to move in the direction of protecting the people that Stephen Miller is targeting. That is a much better use of your time and energy right now. Because the other thing I just want to remind you of here is that more and more in the public discourse, and this is something that I'm watching because I have been thinking for a very long time about things like post-Trump Nuremberg trials and the Truth and Reconciliation Committee work in South Africa after apartheid, about the way in which culture and policy had to shift in Germany after the Nazis were deposed from power, and what that might look like. There is a growing conversation in the public discourse right now about something along the lines of Nuremberg trials in America when this is all over and what that would look like. I just have to tell you, to quote the great Brandi Carlile, I've been to the movies and I've seen how this ends, and the joke's on them. They're not going to be in power forever. And there will be a reckoning to come in the form of some form of judicial and criminal accountability when this is all over. That I actually have no doubt about. I hope I live to see it, because I think I will. Most fascist regimes don't survive longer than a few years, so we shall see. But all that said, the things that I want to stay committed to right now are working to create safety and security for people who desperately need it. I'm just going to say one other thing here. I have purposefully not, this is coming up in the comments right now, I have purposefully not commented on what Ezra Klein is suggesting on this broadcast. I don't really feel the need to do that, other than to point out that there are figures in legacy media who don't want to give up their privilege. And what that looks like for some of them is the idea that we should move more to the center than to the left in order to, like, somehow win over the magical white male Trump working class voter that never votes for Democrats. So I don't want anybody to worry about that. And if you are concerned about it, you can go watch Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ezra Klein in conversation, and you will get everything that you need to know about what's actually going on in that scenario yourself, okay? But we should not be giving any time right now to these white male commentators who are suggesting that somehow we have to throw trans people under the bus and we need, like, functional immigration policy in order to get through this. That's actually, in my book, there are certain purity tests for Democratic candidates going forward. And the baseline, the basement, is abolishing ICE. That's the basement of what I think the test should be. So I'm not listening to anything that he has to say, and I don't recommend that you do either. That's the short of that. All right. Quick note for those of you who are new or emerging activists. We have a new program starting very soon called Power Lab, a 7-week program for emerging organizers on how to overcome outrage and build community action. If you are new to this game, and there's a lot of new viewers here who are, please consider joining us. I will once again drop a note in the top corner of this video once we're done with the live, but also the link to join Power Lab is below. Class starts on the 1st of November. Registration is open until the end of October. I strongly recommend that if you are new or maybe intermediate, like you've attended a rally, maybe you've gone to a meeting, maybe you're involved in your local Indivisible chapter, but you're not really sure what to do next, that you get into this program, because you are going to get direct one-on-one support that is not available from those mass Zoom trainings that are out there right now for free. And you're also going to get very specific advice on what works now, where you live, to move the needle. All right. So please consider joining Power Lab if you have not yet already done so. We have a great group of people joining up for this already. We're really looking forward to it. It's also a great refresher, by the way, for advanced organizers who maybe are like relying on old school tactics that don't work anymore. Please consider joining us for that. And as always, you can support this work by becoming a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistancelive. We are still running our 20% off annual subscriptions using the code podcast for probably, I don't know, another week. So if you want to get in, now's the time. All right. And please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Subscribe if you're listening on podcasts. Hello to all of you tuning in on Spotify and iTunes. And I will catch you all back here tomorrow at regular time. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.